Welcome to the messy middle of entrepreneurship, unfiltered and unapologetic. Uncensored Entrepreneurs, hosted by Stark Cod, Robert Wall, and Tina Torres-Wilson, brings you real stories from the trenches of building a business. Those late nights, hard lessons, big wins, and everything in between. This is where the truth about entrepreneurship lives. No fluff, no filters, just raw, honest conversations with founders who have lived it. So, if you're over the highlight reel and you're ready for the real deal, hit play. Elyssa Smith is a trauma-informed executive coach who helps female executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals heal from hidden trauma and limiting beliefs to reach their next level faster. Through her own healing journey from multiple traumas, she has developed methods to rewire the survival brain and overcome the imposter syndrome, overwhelm, and negative self-talk and perfectionism that keeps so many other women stuck. As a host of Unlock Your Blocks podcast and the creator of the ultimate self-regulation method, Elyssa helps women reclaim their time, energy, and hope using brain science-based techniques for nervous system regulation and trauma healing. Her TEDx talk, Why You Procrastinate and How to Stop It for Good, has garnered hundreds of thousands of views. She has been featured in Forbes and is a regular contributor to Fox 59 Morning News. Elyssa believes that every woman deserves to unleash her wildest potential for success and happiness. Elyssa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you here, Elyssa. One of our co-hosts is missing today, so Tina's not with us, unfortunately. But we're going to continue on, so please send Tina some well wishes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Elyssa, thank you so much for joining us. And we're excited to have you on the show. As you know, we talk a lot about mindset, strategy, business, and so do so many other entrepreneurs. That includes scaling. But what you do is you go a little bit deeper. You go underneath all of that in terms of what's holding women back. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started?
I feel like most heart-led entrepreneurs, we start because something went wrong for us. We're like, oh, that was really bad. Let me help other people get through that because I got through it. So for me, it was a similar situation. As you mentioned in my bio earlier, I was going through a really, really hard time in my life. It included medical trauma, birth trauma, relationship trauma. There was emotional abuse, psychological abuse happening. And I was just in this dark place. And it was like, wow, if I ever make it out of here, if I ever find the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm going to map the way out so that I can help other people coming through this. And what I realized during my healing journey, and I had a coach that really, really helped me. And I was like, how do I do that? How do I help people the way that she helped me? And so I started to get these certifications in specific types of trauma recovery and specific types of healing. And then it was like, I wonder if I could widen this to help more people at a very basic but very effective level. So what I realized is that not only was trauma responsible for things like anxiety, depression spirals, not being able to get stuff done, but it actually could be linked to things as basic and common as procrastination and perfectionism. And when I started working with entrepreneurs, it was by accident. I started getting asked by people, okay, so how do you create a space where you actually go and get stuff done instead of just putting your goals up? Then you're like, oh, look, something shiny. I need to go fold the laundry because I don't really want to do that email today, or I have to send those invoices and that feels scary. So I started to put together techniques that were working across the board to all my clients for them to stress less, regulate their nervous systems. And then they just started being able to, and this was what happened for me too. At the beginning, I was like using myself as a lab rat. If I can calm the space inside my mind, can I just decide I want to do something and go get it done? And the answer turned out miraculously to be yes. I mean, imagine that. You could just decide you want to do something and go do it and not stop yourself or get in your own way. So that's been the progression to now where I get to help people on a much larger scale with these self-saboteurs.
I love that. I love how you went so much deeper than just that surface level trauma, right? You talk about trauma informed, how to take it one more step. And just the basis of what you have coined as the ultimate self regulation method.
Yes. So the method came from, again, I took all my case studies from my first 8 or 9 years of coaching people. And when I could see what was working, the first thing that happened is I created my 3S framework, which is what I got featured in Forbes for. And the 3S framework is just for immediate stress relief and the beginning of long term healing. So everyone's familiar with this idea of survival mode, right? And a lot of us think that we just have bad habits. Oh, I'm a procrastinator, or oh, I do my best work under pressure, or I'm just an anxious person. That's just who I am, or just a perfectionist, and that's how I achieve high. But it turns out that there's a much better way to operate because when you're in survival mode, evidenced by procrastination, perfectionism, people pleasing, negative self talk. Those are all signs of survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you do not do your best thinking because your executive functions, your frontal lobe of your brain is offline because it thinks that you're just trying to save your own life at that moment. Your brain cannot tell the difference between sending a scary email, being late for a 5-minute meeting, or being chased by a wild animal that's going to eat you for its lunch. It automatically escalates to the highest level, the highest order of life-saving capacity. And we're not worried about doing calculus on the way to the nearest tree. So of course you're not going to have that high level thinking on board when you're in survival mode. So if every stressor causes that extreme response, you are up a creek without a paddle. Over an extended period of time, you lose out because your immune system shuts down during that time. When you're really stressed, your immune system isn't trying to fight the flu if it thinks you're just doing a short sprint to get away from something to save your life. So lots of things shut down your digestive system, reproductive system, your immune system when you're stressed. So I created the 3 S's to help people notice when those things are happening and to reduce their body's reactivity to it. So the first S is safety, and it's 3 deep breaths. That communicates, because if you ever tried to talk yourself out of being stressed, how does that go?
We are our own worst coach, as I always try to remind myself. Yes.
It's like, oh, this is not that big of a deal. We're so hard on ourselves. It's not that big of a deal. Just send the invoice or just cold call the client or just do this. We're really hard on ourselves that way. And there's no words that can communicate to the amygdala and the vagus nerve, which are in charge of your survival response. They don't understand that. They're not interested in that. But what they do see is your actions and breath. So if you are taking slow breaths, well, percentage wise, how likely is it you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger? Most people are not slowing down if they're running away from something to take those 3 deep breaths. So it gets its attention. So that's your first S is safety with the breaths. Second S is self-nurturing because it's more evidence that you're not running away from something or fighting to the death. So literally you can just make a cup of your favorite beverage and take a sip. You want to nurture your 5 senses. So lighting a candle, taking a minute outside, something like that that proves again 3 deep breaths, taking a minute for myself, not running from a wild animal. And then the third S is safe support. And when you reach out to someone, even if you're not processing your bad day or your rough stress spot, your system understands, oh, I'm part of the tribe. I'm not going to be kicked out of the herd and siphoned off by a predator. So we must be okay. So you need to give it that proof. The 3 S's give it proof. And then you can go deeper like, whoa, why did I escalate so deep in the first place? But first, you got to get everything back online, right? And when you go underneath it, that's where the types of trauma come in because most people downplay what they've been through. And so once you do the 3 S's, you can dig a little deeper and figure out where is the root of this. And that's where it gets juicy.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. Before we continue, one thing I hear all the time, especially in the early stages of building a business, is how exhausting it is trying to manage everything on your own. I remember feeling like I had a dozen tabs open in my brain at all times. That's exactly what inspired me to create She Has Clients, an all-in-one sales and marketing platform for entrepreneurs who want to grow their business without patching together a million tools. If that sounds like what you need, you can learn more at shehasclients.com. Now let's get back to the conversation.
I love it. And you're absolutely right. I think when we're in this fear flight mode, it is almost like that. This reminds me, by the way, not to take away from all the amazing things that you just shared, but I have a client. What he does is he swims from channel to channel, from country, continent to the next piece of land, right? And so he does this at night, typically, for whatever reason. And the first thing that comes to mind is I'm thinking sharks, right? I'm thinking you swim in the water these huge world records for 20 hours at a time. And I'm thinking sharks, first thing I thought of. And to your point, he talks about some of those same techniques, and you'll probably be able to expand on this. But when I think of everything that I've overcome in life, and then I put myself in that situation, whether it's metaphorically speaking, the sharks that we've overcome, as you mentioned, being chased by a lion or a tiger. And so we've overcome so much in life that in this moment, it's something that I'm not going to be able to overcome. And so I always like that as well, along with, as you said, disrupting the deep breaths, grounding yourself. I don't know about you, Star, but I personally sit in an office quite often. And when I am sitting at a computer, I just have to kick my shoes off. I go outside and I literally ground myself to the earth. I just sit there and it really helps me just think, breathe, everything. But anyways, I love this. And absolutely, I'm going to start using that same example that you gave in regards to being chased by a lion.
So many bells were going off. And for me personally, I've been getting out a lot more. I've talked about this before as well, like just stepping out the house because we do work from home. Robert, you get out and feel a little bit more, but sometimes I have to get out. And so that definitely helps. But just to bring things back for our audience, right? How did trauma show up in your business or leadership style before you actually had language for it? Because you shared so much value, but we want to help them identify some of the pieces that they may not see are there.
What you want to look for, this is where it got tricky because you can't necessarily see it as trauma. So there's a type of trauma that I talk about in my TEDx talk. So a lot of people, when they think trauma, they think big T trauma. That's actually the technical term of it in psychology. Big T trauma is big bad stuff that shouldn't ever happen to anyone. Then there's little T trauma, which is actually becoming a little more well known, and it's ongoing things that are not violent, but they're still emotionally disturbing. So we're talking bullying. Maybe you lost a pet when you were little and you didn't know how to deal with it, losing a family member. But what I needed was a way for that in my TEDx talk to talk about this thing that is particularly linked to the sabotage behaviors that are a trauma alarm that we don't recognize yet across the board. So I talk about tiny T trauma. And this is really, could be really hidden. And we're talking small emotional needs that went unmet in childhood. So this would be things like, I never saw my parents take a break. True story. Never saw my parents take a break in childhood. And they never reprimanded me. I had a great upbringing. I thank God I didn't grow up with big T trauma in the house or little T trauma ongoing, anything that was really negative. But there were the absence of some messages that would have been really helpful for my little perfectionistic, anxious heart. So when I saw people not taking a break, what do you automatically assume as the child? Oh, we don't take breaks until we're done with our work. But the work is never done. So guess who is a great candidate for burnout?
It's me.
So if you learned that we don't take breaks, or that taking breaks is something that lazy people do, or whatever the subtle messaging was, there's your tiny T trauma. There's your little damage. It's just like a little notch on the brain. And the brain says, oh, we work hard until we collapse, and then it's acceptable to take a break. So I learned when I was little that when you're sick, like really, really sick, and you can't get out of bed, then people pay attention to you, then you get nurtured. And again, great family, great upbringing that I had, but we still got these messages. Other tiny T traumas, like money is not a safe thing. Budget is a scary word. These are all little things that form how we adult when we get to be adults. And when you see yourself blaming you for not getting further than you are in your business, when you see yourself being your own worst critic, when you see yourself calling yourself things like, I must be lazy, I just need to work harder, be better, do more. The answer to every problem is one of those three, either to work harder, be better, or do more. That is your body's response to tiny T trauma.
Interesting.
Well, sometimes I really do feel like I'm being lazy, and I'm like, Star, you know better than this.
Well, what happens is that we're so programmed and wired, as you're alluding to, is the fact that as an entrepreneur, we constantly think we have to be moving forward in motion. And that's where burnout comes in. And then when it does come in, and I do even give myself some self-care or I step back, then I start to have those other thoughts like guilt and why am I, as you just said, Star, not doing enough? Or maybe I'm being lazy because I decide that I'm going to unplug and just physically maybe watch a movie with my wife today or whatever it may be. instead of just sitting there on my laptop till midnight. And so when you think of these things, because these are real life examples of what happens to us, what are some techniques that you can help us identify when you're faced with that? What are some small things that you can do to help close that gap between not doing enough and doing too much?
That is such a great question. This is literally what I spend my days helping my clients with. So it's important that you recognize that this is a narrative, this is a story that you have been told. And the first thing that I establish with a brand new client is helping them have the self compassion that comes from understanding there is no other way that you could be responding to stress than the way that you do because of what you've been through. And most people come to me and they're like, I have a best friend who went through, she's an orphan and she went through all this. I know refugees or whatever. And it's like, my trauma, I don't have trauma compared to that. So high achievers are very, very quick to discount the idea that they've been through anything. Oh, it just feels normal. Everyone has their cross to bear. But the bottom line is, if you see that you are resisting a slowdown, if you see that it's hard for you to sit and to just be, even if the list is checked off, your body is resting, but your mind can't. You feel like your nervous system is going a lot.
Yeah. She just described you, Star. I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to attack anyone. I hope that you guys can recover. But really, if you notice those things, the first thing to do is to give yourself an affirmation. I am only responding this way because of what I've been through. And anyone who's been through what I've been through would be doing the same thing. And then we can move from that place of it's not your fault. You're not a failure for your body being at rest and your brain keeping on going. Neither one of those things is a fail. Your body being at rest, which sometimes feels like a fail, and your mind being too busy when you're trying to rest. It's a lose lose when your mind is working hard against you. But it's doing that to protect you because you learned at some point in your childhood, this is the way to safety. I will get more of my needs met now if I do these hard things. And if I'm my own worst critic, I can avoid rejection. I can avoid abandonment, getting kicked out of the herd, getting picked off by a predator. So you're protecting yourself. Your brain doesn't have the update yet. So when you start with the affirmation, like, I'm the one in charge of getting my needs met now.
I love that. Wow. That is so powerful because there's also that healthy balance too, meaning that for those of us that are either high achievers, perfectionists, serial entrepreneurs as a whole, we do operate at a very high level when we have a little bit of pressure, right? A little bit of stress on us. Raising my hand, but I see you nodding as well because most entrepreneurs that I talk to are like, I tend to do really well on tests when I'm cramming the night before, right? It's just sometimes you're at that level. But I love the idea of that acknowledgement, creating the affirmation, if you will, like you stated, where it's like, this is okay. And I am in control and I have the ability to do X, Y, Z, right? Push or a pull. I'd never really thought about it in that context.
I know you have the ultimate self-regulation method, and we hear a lot of coaches in the online space, coaches talking about mindset and healing work. How is this method different than that?
So the ultimate self-regulation method is actually a 6 independent modules. And so it goes over the 6 most common places that people get triggered, the most common areas of life where people get triggered: money, job, finances, your partner, parenting. And there's one more. It's like naming the 7 dwarves. I can never say it unless I'm looking at all of them. But essentially, the goal is in each of the modules, what we break down is a similar pattern. So, this is the way that you handle emotional triggers that pop up from stress or from self blame or whatever that is that's going on for you in your mind that makes you emotionally, what we say, dysregulated. And that's when you're just off your game. I had a client come to me because she's like, listen, every time someone says something even remotely unsupportive to me, I have to go offline in my business for 48 hours because I can't cope. And so you have to have a methodical approach to when you have that escalation in your nervous system. And so each of the modules walks you through like, hey, did you have a really tough day working on your latest project today? So let's talk about the work trigger, or let's talk about a coworker trigger, or let's talk about a parenting trigger. And when you go through each of the modules, the way that we do it is instead of being like, this is just how you work harder to get out of that trigger and just ignore that trigger next time or stuff it down. We say, okay, first we calm. And then we identify, where did it start? Because if you can notice your triggers, your body will tell you before you start into emotional dysregulation, your body will tell you. So I have some clients that say, like for me, I can feel it in my throat when I'm starting an emotional trigger. I won't even notice it mentally always, even though I've been studying this for years, but I'll notice my throat gets tight and the muscles start to hurt a little bit.
I feel it all in my neck and typically my shoulders.
Sometimes like a weight on the chest or like a knot in the stomach. So, have you ever noticed that something was going on with your body way before you knew what it was from? I mean, your body is on it. It will tell you. So, in the modules, I walk everyone through like this is how you discover where that trigger started so that you can grab onto that before you escalate next time. And then we make a plan. Next time you have this sensation, this is what you need to do. So that's how the ultimate self-regulation method is set apart, because we do also talk in there a little bit about what kind of trauma did this come from for you? Because almost every extreme emotional dysregulation is rooted in some sort of belief that came from either a big T, little t, or tiny t trauma.
Wow. So true. I have a little bit of all those, by the way. Big T, little t. So going back or summarizing everything that we've discussed, for those that sometimes operate at these levels, right? Other than what you just described with the tightness and maybe the elevated blood pressure, whatever it may be, what are some other signs that someone can start to notice or that will help them operate from that survival mode that you talk about? Because for many of us, we may just think this is the norm, just the high paced energy of constantly moving. And so, what are some ways that they can actually identify with, I'm in survival mode without even realizing?
I love this question. Okay, so a minute ago, you said a lot of people, in particular perfectionists, entrepreneurs, high achievers, we operate from this idea like, I do best when I cram the night before the exam. I can perform the best. And I have clients that will come to me because they're like, I've been putting off this work project for months and now it's due next week and I got to get it together. Right. So I think we all kind of know, like my MO when I was in school was like, wake up and panic. What is first on the panic list for today? So when you're used to operating in that mode, that is your ding, ding, ding red flag. So if you're operating in that mode, that is your tell. That is your tell that you are in survival mode. But I can hear the perfectionists out there who have depended on the adrenaline rush to get stuff done. Listen, just take a deep breath right now. I'm not going to tell you you can't do it, but I'm going to explain why it might be better to do something different. So, in our brain is what I like to call the inner drugstore. I did not come up with that. I can't take credit for that, but there's an inner drugstore in there. When you are in survival mode, you are in your cortisol spiral. You are all up in your adrenaline. You are in these chemicals that your body has a response to because it has to, because it's emergency mode. That's why in an actual emergency, we are so good in those emergencies. High achievers, put us in a room full of emergencies, we will get that taken care of.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not alone. So the reason for that is because we have honed our capacity to work with the emergency adrenaline and cortisol rushes. And we have trained ourselves that that is when we can get the most done, the most accurately. But it's because what senses are available to you when you're running from a wild animal to save your own life? You get real clear on your sight, your sound, everything gets heightened. If there are any parents out there and you have a child when you're in survival mode and you have a child that's whining at you and you almost lose your ish right then and there, it's because our senses are heightened and we are more focused and accurate and we are less susceptible to distraction because our body thinks it's trying to save us from a wild animal. That's why. But what happens if you stay in that level? If you go through survival mode repeatedly, I'm holding up my phone. We have these, and we never go offline as entrepreneurs, truly. So if we're ultimately operating in that adrenaline cycle for a long period of time without access to our immune system, it never comes back online if you stay in survival mode. Without access to a healthy digestive system, I'm still repairing from years of digestive damage, from living with an acid stomach ache, from the stress of being in that last minute energy. So we have all these things over time. You end up with no adrenaline left. You end up with cortisol that can't produce inside your body anymore. Adrenal fatigue is a very real thing, and I've come back from it twice. So I can speak from experience that chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue in the future for everybody that operates their best, I'm giving air quotes, the last minute adrenaline. So here's what to think about. Don't panic. I just threw everyone into survival mode right now. What you want to do is you want to just look at your body like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that what you've been letting me do with that adrenaline and cortisol isn't supposed to be my everyday tool. That's the band aid. So if you want access to that kind of focus, if you want access to that get it done ability, you can grow it from a place of peace and your work will be better. You will remember and retain more. Your digestive system heals, your neurons, your neural pathways will heal, and you can actually be at that high level of production without nearly as much effort and pain.
Oh, that is so true because when I think and this reminds me of a conversation you and I have had before that when you're in long-term projects, not the ones that you're cramming for, right? That test that we talked about earlier, but when with long-term projects, when you're working with a client through a series of events to overcome over months, you really are in your element. That's when you truly are in that peace mode that you said. You're still a high achiever. You're still operating with efficiency, but you're allowing yourself to slowly grow over that rather than it being a deliverable that has to be due tomorrow, right? So, what a great reminder. And I think that for many of us, this is a great lesson, definitely a reason for each and every one of us to dive in deeper to the work that you're doing. You've referenced the modules many times. So, I'm assuming that's one of the first ways that people can connect with you. Is it things that you have available online?
Yeah, so the ultimate self-regulation method is actually a step-by-step process. It contains those 6 modules. So the ultimate self-regulation method is the method that we use to de-escalate the trigger and to plan ahead for how to handle it next time in each one of those modules. So when I say the modules, that's what I'm referring to. But honestly, the best way for people to see more about what I do, you can follow me on LinkedIn or actually my YouTube channel. I have tons of free trainings on there. My TEDx talk is on there if you go to elyssasmith.com/TEDx, but elyssasmith.com/YouTube is where you can find more of this content. So if you're curious and you're like, I want to know more about this, that's probably the best place to start and just listen and see what resonates. And you really want to be thinking about the fact that adrenaline and cortisol are fantastic lifesavers. They're fantastic for getting stuff done when you really, really need to, right? But they are designed to help with the extra stress, like those extra emergency type scenarios. We can't live as though our whole life is an emergency and expect those systems to still last. And so you start with just understanding that I'm not a problem for responding this way, but I might be able to choose something different and feel even better. And the question I love for people to start with here is what would make this moment just a little bit better. Because when you start to add in, light a candle, take a deep breath, build in a break later, have really good food, and you start to notice the good things you're doing for yourself, your system will start resetting and healing itself.
Wow. Thank you so much, Alyssa. I just want to talk about one thing really quickly because a lot of us do live in the state that you just described. I'm guilty of that. People see that as something positive in us, and so a lot of friends and family and colleagues come to us for support in heightened situations, and so oftentimes I find myself living in this for someone else. So I'm really gonna dive into this because I wanted to talk about boundaries, but we're kinda low on time now, and so if you're someone like myself who is being called upon for urgent situations because you're considered someone who can handle that, it's because they're used to seeing us live this way. So thank you for sharing that as very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I just one little thought about that. We don't have a lot of time, but I just want to offer this. There's a saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And when we have trained people that we are the busy person that will get something done, we're the person that will hold the family together, we're the person that will always show because we are a man or woman of our word, we're that person. It's really challenging and scary to start setting boundaries, but you don't start there. Before we start doing the big scary things that are outside of our window of tolerance, we start doing the little things consistently over time. And that reestablishes our own trust of our gut instincts and our own confidence in the boundaries that need to be set. And then the boundaries are easy.
I love that. And that will prevent you from reactivating those old patterns, right? Just those little things. Actually, I'm glad you brought it up, Start, because I was going to talk about boundaries and rituals as well. So that is true. Many of us fall into those patterns, good patterns and bad patterns, of course. So thank you so much. As we close out, Elyssa, because we obviously have a lot we could continue to unpack with you, we'll have you on the show again, especially once we've had an opportunity to dive in to some of your modules and the work that you're doing. I would love to circle back around with you. What are just a couple main points you'd like to leave our listeners with in regards to things that they can do right now? Those little baby steps that you talked about. Is there anything that you can set them up for success right now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I would love to come back on. You both are amazing and I would love to meet Tina. This has been fantastic. So, starting right now, the first thing I have my one-to-one clients do to start establishing a lifestyle of regulation so that they're not living from adrenaline and cortisol and so that they're not procrastinating and being a perfectionist and hard on themselves all the time is to set a reminder. And this could be, some of my clients get overwhelmed by tech reminders, so they don't do it in their phone. I do it in my phone. You could write on your bathroom mirror with a dry erase marker. You could put a sticky note somewhere. But once or twice a day, at the very least, stop and take 3 deep breaths. And then from there, if you watch my TEDx talk at minute 12 out of 13 and a half, there is an exercise that I walk the audience through that directly communicates safety to the vagus nerve without going through your brain that is overthinking. And so those two things combined, it's almost like they go into a bucket. So even if you don't do the deep breaths every day or you forget one time during the day, it's like, okay, well, I did it once on Monday and that's in this bucket still. Okay, well, I forgot until I went back on Thursday and did it again. So that goes into the bucket. The more times you drop one of those mindful activities that's speaking to your vagus nerve into the bucket, it's compounding interest. It's this exponential growth of safety in your system. And it's simple and it's hard for all or nothing perfectionists to do. But just let it be enough, whatever the small step is that you do today.
Wow, so powerful. Elyssa, thank you so much for bringing just so much depth and honesty and obviously some actionable insights. I know things that I'll do, some changes that I'll make, and I know Star's like, yes, absolutely, because we talk about this. It's a real thing. So thank you once again for coming on the show. Can't wait to connect with you. And hopefully, if you've caught part of this episode, even if you're driving down the road and you're listening on a podcast, go back to the beginning. And I advise you just listen to the entire thing and connect and reach out with Elyssa Smith. Until next time, just keep leaning into growth, resilience, and that transformation that changes not just your business, but your entire life. Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Entrepreneurs. If you're getting value from the show, take a minute to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you tune in. It helps more bold entrepreneurs find us. Until next time, keep showing up, uncensored and unapologetic. And we'll catch you on the next episode.